too.
Okay,
Hi.
perfect. Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks. I'm really excited. I've never been on somebody else's podcast. I've only ever done episodes on my own podcast. So this
No
is really
way.
exciting. Yeah,
Oh
this is
my
my
God.
first guest experience. I'm really excited.
That's so fun. I would have guessed the opposite because you were so well spoken. I was a guest on your podcast. Well, I guess we recorded a few weeks ago, but it's only coming out in August or something, you said?
Yes, I can't remember the exact date now,
Yeah.
but in the summertime. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm used to it now because I've done so many recordings with guests, but I'm always the one driving the questions and asking the questions. So it's like a different experience for me. I'm excited.
Yeah, well, it's okay. We're not going to be like honing down on what do you do? How about like it'll be chill. It'll be chill.
Love it.
So for people who don't know you, can we like talk a little bit about KL marketing? So obviously we do things in a similar space. I run a creative agency. We touch on marketing, but more focused on branding. Your focus is more so on the marketing side, correct?
Yeah. So, I mean, we do a lot of different things. I've really shifted my practice and my agency to be more about storytelling, strategy, or overall, what are you doing in your marketing? Like, what are you doing in your social? What are you doing on your website? What are you doing in your ads? What does your branding look like? Is the branding the right fit for, what you're doing, what your services are, what your products are? So, I've really grown the agency to have a very overall marketing strategy. And I'm very passionate. I geek right out over storytelling and key messaging. What are your brand values? What's your mission statement, your vision, whatnot? So we kind of take all of those pieces. I mean, I started with social. That was the first thing. And I think we can get into more of the story after if you want. But I mean, I got really into it with social. That was my bread and butter and still is kind of my bread and butter to this day. But I did find that a lot of my clients were using social media as a band-aid, right? They thought that if they had this great social media presence and strategy that the sales would fall from the sky and everything was going to be okay because what they were doing on social was so great. And I
Classic.
quickly noticed that if your branding is not great and if your website's not up to
Yeah.
par, and if you're selling a product online, like what does your e-commerce look like? How fast is your website, the website speed, all these different things if you don't even know what your purpose is or what your why is. So I sort of found all of these disconnections in my journey where people were really looking at social like a band-aid. So I kind of expanded on that. And now I offer really great strategy, consulting and whatnot, to sort of help fill those gaps and have an overall marketing strategy for my clients.
Yeah, that's super cool. Like you talk a lot about storytelling. Like for someone who's not familiar with that, what does that look like from a brand standpoint? And why is it so important?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think storytelling is really important because we've really shifted in the marketing space and in the business climate to people supporting brands that they can relate to and that they feel really strongly about. And I feel like storytelling, not only about where you came from or, if you're the face of your brand, how you got there, what the story of your brand is like, what's your background, but also the story of your services, of your products, right? I think that storytelling and saying, we developed this because there was this gap in the market, or we're doing this for this reason. And people don't just spend money anymore just casually, right? They don't just see an ad anymore and spend money if they don't understand where it's coming from or who are the people behind it. So I really honed in on, why is it that you're doing, right? One of my really, like a client of mine who sells skincare in the e-commerce space, like they're really, really excelling at the storytelling component because they're a mother-daughter team. They feel really strongly about, claiming your beauty, your inner beauty, your outer beauty, and like, it's not just about your skin and your skin health. So we've really honed into that storytelling component about like, where do all of these things come into play when you've created this brand and this really great business? And what's the story behind it that you should share in order to, create some really great brand awareness for your company. So I geek right out over storytelling because I think it's so important. And I think it's so different. Everyone's story is so different. And that gives you a really creative edge over what you're doing. If you're so clear on what your story is and what your messaging and your purpose, right? That's that key differentiator that you're looking for in the marketing space.
So like, what's your process when you onboard a client and you realize that maybe they're not doing the best job at telling that story? I'm sure you have, aside from building out a strategy, like what are the steps that you guys take as an agency in order to help them, define that story and then actually tell it?
Right, that's a good question. I think I'm still really in the learning phase about establishing a process, like not to sugarcoat anything. Like I think establishing a really solid process takes a lot of time and it's not something that ever came easily to me. And I find it's really I find it's very difficult because every client is so unique, right? I don't like to have a cookie cutter process and I like to sort of tailor it to what every client needs and what every client situation is. So, I mean, I don't like to just send out, like, I never will just quote, like, I always like to have a conversation with the
Hmm.
person. And I think through that conversation, I can really establish, okay, where there's a gap in this, or there's a gap here. And the reality of it is some people really just want to pursue social media. Like, they don't really want to take the time to do the key messaging. They don't really want to take the time to do this. So I'll often start with the social if that's really what they want. And then through my relationship with them, I always have regular touch points to make sure that, we're always leveling up where we can. But I always try to, at the beginning, we offer a really great package at the beginning where, these are all things that we discuss. Like, what is your marketing strategy? What's your key messaging? What's your mission, vision statement? Just so that we know that we're starting off on the right foot, no matter what, the services or the way that we're going to pursue this working relationship together. I like to establish right off the bat, like, if this is something, and there are clients who've done this work already, right? There are some clients that I've worked
Yeah.
with other agencies that have, they're really clear on what their mission vision statement is, and they're really clear on their brand values. And these are conversations that they've had internally. It really depends on the size of the business. I work with a lot of small businesses, so not everyone does that, but some of them do. But just really making sure that we're always on top of that conversation and making sure that we're constantly communicating to make sure that we're improving, because I don't believe in jumping into a social strategy if you don't have these things established. And a lot of
Hmm.
people do this, unfortunately, but I think that there's a huge gap. Like, it's not just posting pictures and posting pretty visuals and whatnot. I think if you're not really clear on, like I said, what your messaging is and what you're about, there's going to be that gap, and your audience is going to be able to tell that when they look at your social.
Yeah. Well, for sure. I totally agree. And I think that's something that I recognize, especially in the smaller businesses when they're kind of like skimping out and they don't want to spend money. It's like,
Yeah.
but hang on, because this money will be so well spent. And if you don't do that first phase in like the strategy and brand development and brand, like the full brand strategy, not just like social media strategy, but brand strategy,
Absolutely.
understanding like who you are, what you do, your tone of voice, what your values, and like really understanding your competitors, looking at that landscape, like all of those things are going to influence every other step that you take in your business, right? So like any creatives, all the content pillars on your social, like you said, email strategy. It's
Yeah.
like, what kind of emails are you sending out? What kind of content are you posting if you don't have that already established, right?
It should be a very well-rounded approach. And like I said at the beginning, I just think that
Mm-hmm.
people tend to gravitate because that's the climate that we're in, right? Social media is such a big topic, and it's such a big thing, and it's such a big part of your marketing component. But, and I started my agency, I think it's going to be going on 6 years in July. And at the time, like, I was a university student and I had no idea. I really had no idea what I was doing, like, completely, absolutely no idea. And I remember all these conversations, and what I know is I was good at doing the social, and had good ideas, and I had a good visual, like, I had a good eye for it.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that I knew I did well. But at the time, like, it's all a learning component. Is you don't really know these things until you've experienced it with a client, and then you tell yourself,
Oh
wow,
yeah.
this person does not know even what their purpose is for, so these are all learning curves that you learn with time and with experience. But at the time, it all sounded great to me. Like, wow, let's do social. Like, let's do a photo shoot. Let's do really great social content for your Instagram. At the time, there were no reels. I don't even think there were stories. So it was just like
Mm-hmm.
static posts and videos. But these are really things. And I find every client is so unique and so different. And I think that's what I love the most about my job, is that every single scenario is different, right? Every
Yeah.
conversation is different. Every account is different, and everyone has a different story. And I find that that just keeps it super super interesting. But it's true, like I said, when I started out, like, I had no idea that these are all pieces that were going to fall into place. And that's like, okay, well, there's the website, the social, the ads, the emails. And then that kind of became, like, as I grew the agency, like, having that really really full circle well-rounded approach, which I think is
Yeah.
so important.
I think it's important for people to also recognize, like what you said, is you have to kind of like jump in, and it's okay not to know what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
I think I saw something, I think it was like yesterday or something, just like scrolling on social, that was saying, learn by doing, don't learn by learning. Because like there's only so much knowledge you can like read about, and courses and this and that, which like sure can like work to your advantage. However, if you don't ever put anything into practice or just like try and
Yeah.
take that leap, you're never going to take that next step. So it's like what's the saying, like work scared, like do it scared.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not pro at that, at doing things scared. But I think that that's a really great point. So I was in the co-op program at John Molson. So for anybody who doesn't know what the co-op
Okay.
program is you do school for 3 semesters in a row, and then you alternate a working semester and a school semester. So I did the first one. I was initially in accounting, then switched to marketing. Anyways, that whole journey was super long. And then when I got into marketing and I was in the co-op program, I got to do an internship for a toy company. And it was a really phenomenal experience, like to your point of actually trying and putting these skills to the test, like the skills
Hmm.
that you've learned at school that you never really actually get to practice. And it was putting yourself out there in the workforce and working with professionals that you don't really have that much experience. And then that experience was pulled from me because my grades were too low. So I only got to do the one
No
working
way.
semester, and I was removed from the co-op program. And I remember telling the woman at John Molson, who was part of like who was kind of like my mentor or guiding me, if you will. Like I wouldn't call her a mentor,
Right.
unfortunately, but the one who was guiding me through this. I remember telling her, like, are you seriously gonna pull this opportunity from me? Because I think this is such a great learning option for us that we don't really get in the classroom, and having this real working experience, and like, you're going to take this away from me now.
Hmm.
So I vowed that one day, and I've done it a few times, but that I was going to have a really great internship program for students so that they could actually get a really like a real work experience. And I think that just teaches you, to your point, I think that's a great point, is that you have to do it scared, and you have to just try things even though you're not 100% sure that you know what you're doing. I've done that like time and time and time. I still do it every day.
Yeah, no, I feel you. And I think as you're continuing to grow and scale, I think you're kind of on the same path, right? You're not just like sitting back, sedentary,
No.
comfortable. Um, you're always going to learn things. And, you kind of get to a point where you realize, hey, this is going to keep happening. So let's just like get comfortable being here, because
Yeah.
as you continue to grow and scale and build your team and work with different partners or expand your services, like there's literally always something, whether it's, internally with operations or
Mhm.
externally with clients, because as you're, adding on your services, you're also now basically reintroducing, or not reintroducing, but introducing new processes, right?
Yep.
Um,
All the time. Yeah.
how many times, like literally, I've had so many experiences where I just like want to hit my head against the wall and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. And no. How many times have you failed within your business?
So
Like,
many times, and like still happens all the time. But what I was going
yeah.
to say is I feel like we work these things up so much in our heads.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I'm a classic, and I even to the point where I've had to implement meetings in the morning because it would ruin my entire day if I was like working up to a meeting that was stressing me out because I fucked up or something. Oh my God, is this an
Yeah,
explicit podcast?
no, you're
In
fine.
case I messed up.
You're
And I
fine.
had like the meeting at 3 p.m. and then I was spending the whole day worried about that 3 p.m. meeting. But I find that
Yeah.
that's one thing in entrepreneurship, is that we make things out to be such a big deal in our heads because it's our agency and it's our
Hmm.
responsibility and whatnot. But these clients that we work with, they have 100,000 million things going on. And it usually, you have the conversation. If you have to have a difficult conversation, or there was negative feedback, or there was a mistake, you go into it professionally. You don't make excuses. You're like, you know what, this happened. This is what we're going to do to fix it. And they're
Yep.
usually really chill about it. Like I've
Yep.
had very few incidents where I was literally waiting to get onto a Zoom or going into a meeting, and I was like, my hands were sweating, and I was like, oh my God, we messed up, or they're going to be mad or whatever. And it ends up being fine. So like that's one
Yeah.
lesson. It's just we tend to overwork things in our head. And when you fail, everybody fails. Like all these business owners that I work with, they go through their own stuff in their own businesses, right? They've been through it. They've built a business too. They've had their own failures. So as long as I think it's in your problem solving approach. Like I think
Hmm.
mistakes will happen. I have people on my team, mistakes happen on that too. Like you have to take extreme ownership,
Yeah.
and it's always up to you to find a solution. So I try to take all these things as learning experiences, and I'm like, okay, this happened. How can I now improve my processes so that now we know that this is a gap here, or it's a pain point, and like how can we improve so it doesn't happen again, or it doesn't happen with another client, or if it happened with this client, like how do we address it? So and obviously it's easier said than done. It can be stressful. It can be, like you said, banging your head on the wall, like, oh, I can't believe this happened, or I can't believe I did this. But I'm trying, because that slows you down, right? That
Yeah.
slows your day down. It beats you down. It's a drag, and it can really affect your time. And the fact is, I realized a long time ago, like I don't have time to feel sorry for myself. Like I don't have the time to just like sit around and like be like, oh, I can't believe this happened. So it's all in problem solving. And I think clients will come and go. Some client experiences will be great. Most client experiences are great. You'll have the odd one here and there that doesn't work out. And that's just kind of the way business is. And it's a hard lesson to learn, especially the first time it happens. It's a really hard pill to swallow, but it happens. It'll happen again. And it's just kind of in you, how you navigate and then how you learn from it moving forward, I think.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like I have a very similar philosophy, and I feel like I literally said exactly what you just said. I don't know, to someone else on another podcast somewhere down the line, because it's like, it's what I believe and it's what I preach. As much as it's like, yeah, you hit your head against the wall, but it's like, give yourself a moment to be like, fuck.
Yeah.
And then be like, all right, like you said, take that, learn from it. What can we now implement in order to make sure that it doesn't happen again? And that's truly like where I've seen my most growth and my most change is by having made those mistakes. Because I don't know about you, but like, have you worked in other agencies before?
No, I've always worked for myself, which is really weird. We can get into that too if you want.
Well, no, I mean, like, that's what's interesting. So like for me, I felt like there was a gap, like I was missing something to kind of like go back on my story. Cause I'm not sure that you know this about me.
No.
But so I started freelancing in like 2011. So I had always kind of done my own thing as a graphic designer. I worked for other brands. I've worked, in-house. But the one thing that I didn't do was work at an agency as a designer. So when I started Nomad Creative, I was basically like starting an agency without having agency experience.
Yeah.
So midway through, I actually took on a consulting role at a digital marketing agency. So I was running Nomad Creative. Also, this was in the first few years. So I was actually still working as a flight attendant.
Okay. Yes. This you told me about. Yes.
And I was consulting then at a digital marketing agency. So I did that for like 10 months to really understand like what it was like to be within this agency environment.
Smart. Okay.
Yeah. And I feel like I learned a lot. Plus I have other friends who, work for either like tech companies or in specific industries, that are doing similar things like marketing and branding and whatever. So I really like to pick their brains and learn from them, because I felt like that was missing. It's like, what do I need to learn that I don't already know without having to like make the mistakes? And that's a big reason why I have this podcast too, is like talk to people like you. It's like, okay, like where have you made your mistakes and what can I learn from you, and vice versa, so we can maybe like skip a step.
Well, I love that. I think that's a really great point. And it's honestly something I struggle with and think about a lot is, this all happened so quickly. And for me, it was just not an opportunity I could pass up. Like it wasn't something it could be like, oh no, let me just work for somebody else and then start my agency. I had all these really great opportunities that I felt at the time. I was like, there's an opportunity here and I can't just sit on it and whatnot. But it's something I think about a lot is that it was actually just a conversation that came up with a client the other day. And she was like, like you don't have any experience in the corporate world. And it's true. Like it's not sugarcoating it. Like I don't have any experience. I worked part-time for a software company, which was really like a phenomenal experience, but part-time, like I never really worked full-time anywhere. So that's something I think about and struggle with. I'm like, how can I maybe get this experience elsewhere? So I'm trying to put myself more like physically into other organizations and like, how can I help them with their marketing strategy and see how they work internally? But that's like, I like that idea of like consulting for an actual, like another agency and see how they do things. That's a really great, tip. Cause yeah, it's really, and I think it's something that maybe I wouldn't say that I'm insecure about, but it's something that I go back and I'm like, oh, well, like I've never done that or I've never seen that. And it hasn't stopped me at all, but it's just something that I keep going back to. Like maybe I'm missing some of that experience that would be helpful.
Katrina, what I'll tell you though, so what was interesting about this experience and me going into consult in this role, they hired me to be the director of their creative department. So I went in thinking like, I will have a superior and I'm going to learn from them. I was the superior. It just like ended up working out that way because they saw how I was like growing and building Nomad. And they're like, we want you to do that with our creative team, because they were focused mainly on like influencer marketing at the time. Okay. And so basically having my business mindset, I looked at their processes, how they were doing things. They were pretty much non-existent. So I implemented, processes and systems to make them like communicate better between the departments, all of this stuff that I already did for my business. And then other elements where they're like, oh, it would really be great to have like this in place, or like, what are we going to do when we onboard a new client? Like at the time, I didn't have proper onboarding decks. I didn't have like a brand discovery presentation. It was just like a call. So now, because I had basically been pushed to do these things for another company, I was like, wait, like, how come I'm not doing this for myself? You know, like,
Yes.
and
Love
they didn't
that.
even have that in place yet, but I kind of like helped them. I was like, this would be great to have. And then I was like doing my research and I'm like, wait, this actually exists. This is a thing that people do, you know, because another little trick that I did is I created a like fake email and then started emailing companies and asked them to send me their like pitch decks to see what they looked like, to
Oh,
see
smart.
what they're
Okay.
talking about, what they're sharing and this and that. So I was basically doing my market research, you know, also on
Love
like
that.
pricing too. You want to know like where to stand in terms of your pricing. So yeah, that's kind of how I've been cheating my way through.
Well, I think I mean, two things. So I think it's really important to also mention that there's always going to be a long list of things to do. Like my
Hmm.
list of things that I want to have, that I want to implement, that way that I want to do things. And that goes back to working on the business, not in the business. And I'm not at a point yet where I'm working that much on the business. I think I'm turning that corner very soon about, having somebody really like full time who's dedicated, because I only have one person on my team for now.
Hmm.
But having somebody who could really work like in the business so that I could focus on working on the business.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is you'll realize really quickly, if you're an entrepreneur and you have a business mindset and it's something that you really want really badly, you end up figuring it out. Like
Yeah.
somehow, some way or another, even though I sit down and I'm like, I have no idea how to tackle this, or I don't know what I'm doing, you end up somehow figuring it out. Like if you're
Hmm.
really that keen and you're that determined to make this work, somehow everything falls into place. And it's, and again, like it might not be perfect, but at least you get that experience and you're like, okay, well, next time I'm going to try it again and I'm going to improve on what I did. But for some reason, it always kind of like works out, which I think that just, that goes to show like when you really, really want something really badly, things always kind of work out in the end.
Yeah. I would almost even say like it may be working even to our advantage not having had that experience, because we're coming in with fresh, innovative ideas and approaches
Mm-hmm.
and doing things and developing processes and whatnot in ways that work for us and our team, whereas maybe some older processes or things that already exist in agencies don't work. When you look at the culture, for instance, I saw it
Yeah.
firsthand, you know, the overworking, the like, I was in situations where, and I was like a superior, right? So I was kind of like forced to tell someone to like work over the weekend because the CEO was making me do that. And it felt so wrong. I was
Yeah.
like, we have work hours for a reason. If it's like once in a blue moon and there's like something crazy big happening, like, okay, fine, understandable. But if it's like every single day plus like over weekends and this and that, it drives me crazy. Like, people need to have a work life balance. And I know that that's something that you're passionate about too. And it's like, I built my company in a way to give people the freedom to travel, to work from anywhere, to build their own hours, to work on the
Mm-hmm.
projects that they want to work on. Because especially in the creative industry, like that's where passion comes through. It's like when you feel good about what you're doing, when you're happy about the team that you're surrounded by, when you feel respected and heard, all of those things are so important. And I felt like that was lacking in any in-house brand experience and agency experience that I've had in the past. And it was a big reason why I wanted to start my own thing, because I was like sick and tired of having to, first of all, clock in 9 to 5,
Right.
because that's not when I was inspired and when I wanted to work.
I think the culture topic is really, really important. And I think that's something that I really took away when I worked for the software company. I think the software company that I worked for had an excellent company culture. And going back
Good.
6 years, like I think we've even still come a long way 6 years later
Mm-hmm.
about having that work-life balance and how important having like a strong company culture is. So that experience taught me a lot, mostly because I don't, how could I say this? It's important for me, for the people that I work with and the people who work for me. I don't like to say for me, I like to say with me. Like I don't
Yeah.
think that's not the way I like to see it, but you catch my drift, because I don't do it myself. Like I don't have a great work-life balance and I don't
You
want
don't.
my employees. No, I really don't. I don't know
Interesting.
why you thought that I did,
I
but no,
thought
I
you
really don't.
did.
No,
Okay,
I
wait,
don't.
we have to dive in. Why what?
Yeah, I think because I'm such a micromanager, and that's something I'm
Oh.
working really, 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 really hard on, like not to be. And have this sense of urgency that everything needs to be done like right away. And so I'm working really hard
Mm,
on making sure that, if an email comes in Friday afternoon or an email comes in Saturday morning, like it doesn't have to be tackled right away. Same thing with text messages and whatnot. And I think because I was such like and I'm a huge overachiever, but I think when I started and I was so like keen and I was a shark and I wanted all the things right away, it was always kind of like catching everything as they came, and there was never anything on hold, right? Everything was so urgent, and I had this sense of
right.
urgency. And so now I'm seeing this, like now as I'm starting, like probably like only, I would say only since the beginning of this year that I've really like started to like be off on the weekends. Like I actually do take my weekends now. And I think
Yeah.
that's like, now I'm seeing like how important it is to take your weekends off and like
Yeah.
having that, that rest time and that downtime. But like I will work till 11:30 at night, like most, like many nights a week. And like that's something I was like constantly doing, because to me, and this is a huge flaw of mine, it's like it's never enough. Like nothing is ever enough. It's not good enough. It needs more, it needs to be done sooner, it needs to be done better, needs to be this, that. So and I like this topic of company culture, because that's really not what I want for my team. Like I see
Hmm.
myself doing it, and I would never want somebody above me to be like, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that the way that I'm doing it. So I think it's really important to make sure that I'm encouraging my team. And as my team grows, like I have a small team, but as my team grows, I want to make sure that I'm also like setting the example, and that they don't think that in order to like me be happy with their work and how they're doing, like I don't want them to have to do the work the way that I do it, right? So
Yeah.
it's something that I'm learning. I think I've come a long way in the last like 6 to 12 months about like the work life balance. And like don't get me wrong, I think that's a huge misconception, because everyone follows me on Instagram and thinks that I do really fun things all the time. It's a conversation I have a lot. Everyone's like, "Oh my god, you're always out like doing fun things and like drinking wine and like going to nice dinners and whatnot." But it's like the reality is, like last week I went to a broker launch party, and then I had one drink, and then I went to do my workout, and then I went home to work, right? It's all a misconception, right? All these
Hmm.
things you see on social media, you see all the fun things, all the pretty things, but there's like so much that goes on in the back end. So I think a lot of people think that I have a really good work life balance, but I'm making my way there, but not like 100% there yet.
Yeah, you'll make it there. But honestly, like
Yeah.
it's good that you see that and you recognize that. A lot of it has to do with also like being okay with letting things go, because you're talking
Hmm.
about like perfectionism and all that stuff. Like the second you really start onboarding a bigger team, you're going to see like more things are going to get like fucked up, mistakes are going to happen, and like it's fine, like it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about earlier, it's like we make things up way bigger in our heads than they actually are, and separating that like personal life from business, being like, you know what, it's not the end of the world. Like
Hmm.
we will all survive, we will all sleep well tonight. But if
Yeah.
you think the opposite, you're going to let that overwhelm your life and your thoughts, and that's where it starts to affect like your mental health and stuff, right? And i
Yeah.
think i think I was like at that point, to be honest, Katrina, like the first 2 years especially, like I said, I was still
Hmm.
working another job. I decided to consult. I was working until like 11:30 at night with my freelance clients and with building Nomad, blah blah blah. So like I've done it, but then I kind of got to a point where I was like, this is not what I want to be doing, and this is not why I started my business. So like I need to make a shift. And once I started kind of like letting go and just trusting other people to be able to support me along the way, that's when I started to really see things flourish. And
Yeah.
like truly, I had mentioned this on my last podcast episode, but where I'm at right now in my business, it's like we're making as the most money we've ever made, but my expenses are at their
Hmm.
highest. And that's because I've been letting go. But I've been letting go within the same process and system and maintaining the same level, or like amount of clients, if you will, so that we know that this works. This way, once we start reinvesting back in the company literally next month, we have a system and a team that's in place that I know can be successful. So like I'm not nickel and diming. Like I don't really like care about the end number. I mean, obviously like I do to a degree because I want to
Yeah.
make money, but
Yeah.
that's not my focus right now. My focus right now is like building something that's sustainable, that will give me the freedom and liberty to also live my life and do my own thing, and, not have to stress every single day about what the client is doing. And truthfully, project manager has been the biggest game changer for me, having that
Okay,
person manage
interesting.
accounts. Yeah.
Okay. Well, because I think, I mean, one thing like I remember, like a piece of advice that like a client had given me, because I'd had a meeting one day and he asked me, he's like, how are things? He's like, are you managing well? Are you busy? How are you managing everything? And then I told him, I said, I have my part-time employee and she's starting full-time in July. And he said, that's so great. He says, he's like, can I give you one piece of advice for that? And I said, sure, like anytime. And he said, you have to trust that people can do things better than you can.
Yep.
And that is so true. I think when they're so rewarding, once you sit down and you have a team that you're really proud of, that you nurture, and you sit down and you actually look at what they're capable of and they do it even better than you could.
Mm-hmm.
That's super rewarding, right? It's like,
Yep.
wow, like I feel like I'm nurturing a team that, is excited to be on board, is excited to do work with me. And that's so, like, I remember him saying that, like, you got to trust that, they're capable and they're able to do things. And you got to just like you said, like, you have to be able to take a little bit of a step back, because otherwise, and, I got to that point too, where this is not why I decided to do that. I didn't decide that I was going to do this so that I could work Saturday and Sunday and I could be here at the office at 11:30 p.m. Like it makes no sense, right? So I got to this realization that I was like, no, like I want to travel more. I want to do more things. Like I pursued entrepreneurship so that I could have the flexibility that I want to have.
Right.
And so that's like right. But you kind of get trapped in it and you want it so badly and you want so many things that you're hustling. Like I was really caught in that hustle. It's like, no, like I need to do this. I need to have that. I need to work harder. I need to this, that. And you always have these like little voices like talking to you. But then you get to a point where I'm like, no, like this is what I wanted, I would have just gone corporate. Like I would have worked a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 7 or whatever that looks like at whatever job. And I would have been marketing manager, director, or whatever at like a big corporate company. But that's not the path that I chose for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm like replicating that behavior, then what's the point really? Might as well have like the secure salary and the benefits and all these things, right? There has to be some pros to working for yourself too.
Yeah, definitely. I hear you there. So you just have one team member right now, you said, right?
Yeah. So she's starting full time with me in July. So far it's been just me and a part-timer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like learning to manage that. And I think sooner than we think there will be more, but I work with a lot of suppliers. So like I have an in-house employee, but I work with a lot of suppliers for like web design, graphic design. Like I work with a lot of different suppliers.
Because I was going to ask you, like in terms of expenses, this must mean like you're bringing in a shit ton of money, like for yourself if you're only paying one team, but like you're outsourcing a lot is from what I'm understanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean, I do very well for myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's always, and as you know, it's always like managing cash flow, right? So you could have like really impressive numbers, but if you're not managing your cash flow, then there could very well be nothing left at the end. So, I mean, I think that was a big learning experience. And I think one piece of advice I could also give to anybody listening is like, make sure you're on top of your bookkeeping, because that's something that I did not really, not that I didn't care, but I didn't have much clarity. And I unfortunately hired somebody, then I didn't do my due diligence about like how this person was going to go about like organizing my finances and whatnot. And it just really ended up not being what I needed. But I think if you find a really great partner, whether it's an accounting or a bookkeeping firm or whatnot, that's able to, keep you accountable, set you up for success. Like my accountant made me the most beautiful budget spreadsheet. So I can exactly see like, what are my projections for sales next month? What are my projections for expenses? What are my budgets for expenses? Like what can I spend on marketing and promotion? What can I spend on this? What can I spend on content creation, on photography, whatever it is. She made me this beautiful spreadsheet, and now like she inputs it, like she plugs in all the numbers and she updates it every month. So I have so much clarity on like what I'm forecasted to have left over at the end of the year, what I'm forecasted to make. So I'd say like that was a huge learning curve actually, is making sure that you're working with somebody in your bookkeeping that can actually help you on the financial side. Cause like you said, it's not only about that. Like obviously it's not only about that, but you want to make sure that you're staying afloat.
Mm-hmm.
And that you like, now I have somebody full time, like I need to make sure that I'm able to pay them. So it's like, you have to be on top of all these things. And that's something you realize quickly. Like if you're not keeping up with your expenses, if you're paying yourself, but you're not being mindful of like income taxes, like that'll come and hit you too. Like those are all the things that you learn really the hard way, like especially the income taxes. You're like, whoa, like those come at you real fast when tax season comes around. So those are all things like I think those I learned the hard way, but we're in a good place. So no, everything is good. Everything's going really well. And then we have the employee, but like I said, I have a lot of suppliers. So the expenses really depends on the project that's going on at the time. Like
So
at whatever
like
given
how
time.
are you able to really project? Because like one thing with me, and I might ask you for your contact for your bookkeeper.
No
Just
worries.
because I would love to have something more thorough like that. So like where I've found it most challenging is that we're building out our social media division right now, so we don't technically have like monthly retainer clients regularly, right? That's what we want to build out. We want to build out that portion. However, our bread and butter is like the branding. So the brand development, brand strategy, packaging design, web development, and then we're trying to like move them into social after, right?
Right.
So because of that, we have clients more so that kind of like come and go. They're like big number of projects, but that means they're constantly going and looking for new clients as opposed to having those month to month retainers. So is your business mainly focused on month to month retainers? Is that how you're able to create these projections so easily?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd say projections. Okay. So the projections were definitely made off of like the numbers that I made last year.
Okay.
So like we kind of like estimated the growth with what we had. Cause unfortunately the bookkeeper I worked with before was just like, I hope she doesn't listen to this, but like terrible. Like anyways, it was a horrible experience.
Okay.
And I had no clarity. And like one of the main things that I had said at the beginning that I made really clear about is like, I need to know. Like I need to know what's going on. I need to know. I'm not a numbers person, but I'm a planner. So I like to know what's happening. So the growth that we projected was based off of the percentage of growth from each month last year. So that's what I'm going to keep doing. And then I have a projected and an actual. So the projected growth, I try to increase. It's very ambitious, but I try to increase it 15% every month. So 15% each month, like increase in revenue. And then she kind of builds my expenses and whatnot. But so to your point, so these are things, like learning curves too, is like my clients now, yes, it's a retainer. It's a monthly retainer for social, which makes it easier to predict what it is. But at the time, like when I was just learning, right, I didn't even think that, there should be like a 3-month commitment or a 6-month commitment or a 12-month commitment, right? These are all things that you learn in the process. But as my business grows, so there's a lot of one-off projects. So I have social media retainers. I have consulting retainers. So like few hours per month or however the package ends up being. So I have that as well. And then there are some one-off projects. So like, yes, I do work with some people, with some suppliers on like website branding, stuff like that. So there's the one-off and then there's the projections. And it's not always accurate, right? It's a projection for a reason, but that really helps me. It's almost something that you're chasing, right? So it gives you a target and it gives you something that you can sort of like look forward to and work towards and see like, okay, like this is what I have to do to kind of meet that number and that threshold.
So what's your goal? Like you're to like add on like 1, 2, 3 clients per month? Like what does that 15% look like?
I'd say probably 2 to 3 clients.
So every month you're adding 2 to 3 new
That's
clients.
the goal. Yeah.
That's insane.
Doesn't happen every month.
But do you have some that drop off at the same time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It doesn't happen very often. But then I think that the thing you have to realize with marketing, and I learned this the hard way, is that you're not going to be the right fit for everybody. Like, especially on social, like you're not going to be the right fit. And there's some clients that we've had that unfortunately it just like wasn't, they wanted something very specific. And like, despite our recommendations, like that's not what they wanted. That's not the outcome. And for what I do, I find there's a huge personality aspect to it. Like, I think you have to be right. If you're working on a social media retainer with clients, like I've had clients that I've been doing social for 5 years. Like I have a great relationship with them. And like, we have great meetings, we communicate and whatnot. And I always say when new people come on board, it's a collaborative effort. It's not you hire me and never speak to me again because you don't want to take care of it. It's a collaborative effort. Like I need to know from your team, or you have to connect me with a designated person on your team so that I know what are the events, what are the charity initiatives you're doing, what are the promotions that are going on. It doesn't unfortunately doesn't fall from the sky. Like I don't know if there's something happening unless somebody tells me, right? So these are things that, we've really built. So the personality, what I mean by personality component is that there's really like and I fine-tuned this over the years, but there's really a way that you have to go about communicating with these clients so that they feel like they're taken care of and they feel like they're comfortable coming to you in an email saying like, hey, I need to add this in last minute. And that's another really good point, is that what my agency does really differently, and social especially, is that a lot of the bigger agencies, they set the monthly calendar and you can't change it, right? So they'll set the calendar for July, let's say, they send it off for approval. It gets approved by the client and there's no changes, no add-ons, nothing, right? I respect that. I think that's like, I get it. You're a big agency. But one of the things that I feel really strongly about is that even though we grow, even if we're getting into that bigger agency status, if you will, I always want to have that flexibility for my clients, because if something happens and, you know, like especially small business owners, they'll decide last minute, okay, next week we need to do a promotion because, you know, maybe our numbers are not where they want to be, or we need to add this in, or we got this really great deal from a supplier and we need to add this in. Like, I always want my clients to have that flexibility to add things in, even though the calendar is set. Like, I want to be flexible for them and whatnot. So like, those are all things you kind of learn. And like, I think your original question was like, do you have clients that like jump off? Not very often, knock on wood, like doesn't happen very often. But yeah, of course, like some of them, and some of them are very seasonal too, right? I've had clients that do like winter apparel, right? They're not going to have the same strategy in July that they will in November and December, right? They sell winter apparel. So that's also like having the flexibility of also changing the mandate a little bit depending. I'm a big believer that, you know, your marketing strategy should be 12 months out of the year, but some people don't have the budget for that, or some people don't have the content for that or whatnot. So it's like, you can't be doing a photo shoot for winter apparel in the middle of summer, right? We need like a specific setting so that it looks like it's snowy or whatnot. So these are all challenges. Like that's what I said at the beginning. Everyone is different. Everybody has a bit of a different mandate, but they kind of like ebb and flow depending on the season, the time and whatnot.
So what does your like average package look like for social? Like, what does it include? What does it cost?
Yeah, I'd say the base one. I won't say the cost because it really does depend on a lot of things. Like, it depends if we're on the hook for photography. It depends on if we're on the hook for videography. Like, it depends on a lot of things. Some clients, like, they like to take care of their own photography and they just send it our way for management purposes. Like, and we just kind of manage the calendar.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say the standard package, like the one that a lot of people end up going for, is like 8 posts, 12 to 16 stories, and like 1 reel per month. Not like a huge deliverables, but a lot of them like to start with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say at a minimum, depending on like what you're providing and whatnot, like you're looking at least $1,500 depending.
Yeah.
That's like a bare minimum.
Yeah. That's if like all the content's provided kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because then there's, you know, there's a lot of things like we do translation. So for like my Quebec clients, everything needs to be translated. Everything needs to be translated. We're looking at like hashtags. Some of them require us to go on site for photo shoots. Some of us require to take the photos, the reels. Some of them are far, right? So I have to like charge for the mileage and the travel time. Some of them are just down the street. Some of them are an hour away. Some of them are like, I have to fly there. You know what I mean? So it's like, it really depends on, so that's why I don't like to give, like, I like to really quote, like, depending on the case.
Of course.
But I'd say a bare minimum, it would be like, I'd say around $1,500 mark.
Yeah. And so when you're going out, like if you're creating content, do you have like a designated person that goes and does content? Because like that's a whole other ball game, you know, like not only just like photography, but video specifically.
Yeah. So again, that depends on the budget, on the client's budget. If they want to do pro video, I have somebody who does pro video. If they want to do social reels like that are just iPhone quality, then obviously that's going to be a cheaper price point. And I have an excellent person on my team who does that. I also have other suppliers that I can send if they want to do like content creation, depending. I have like some photographers that really only like to do interiors and real estate. I have some photographers that really like to do product and lifestyle. It kind of depends. So I do have a little bit of a network, or quite a large network of people that I like to work with for those things. But yes, you're right. If I have to go on site, or somebody from my team has to go on site, I don't do it as much myself anymore. I used to, but if I have to send somebody on site, then obviously there's a cost associated for the time. I mean, I think people really underestimate how much time goes into building like a really great social calendar. There's also a lot of back and forth with approvals, right? The client will always have things that they need to edit, or maybe there's something in the videos that needs to be re-edited and then re-exported and re-uploaded, and like all these things that take a lot of time, right?
That's
it's all
what
these
they don't
little
realize. Yeah, you have
it's
to
like a lot of
the program again, like it's a whole thing.
Well, I think especially with the videos, I think a big thing that clients don't realize is that when we go on site and we take hundreds of videos, right? You have to sort through all the videos and then you have to look through all of them. And that's a huge time commitment. to sort through all the content. And then if you need to edit it and you need to go back into the content, like those are all things. So that's all things that get factored into the price, is how many rounds of editing do we go through? Like those are all things that, and they're not things, like in full transparency, they're not things that I knew to charge for at the beginning, right? They're all
Yeah.
things that you learn, and that's how sort of the packages are established now, is because I want it to be as smooth as possible. But there's so many different things that go into it. Meetings. Some of my clients like me to be part of like team meetings, right?
Yeah.
If I'm on a call for an hour, like all of my time has to be accounted for. So
Yeah.
if I'm on a call, like understanding like what things are going on and whatnot, like there's all, some of them don't do that. Some of them do that. Some of them rather meet in person. Some of them would rather meet virtually. Like it's all different. So it's all kind of learning like how much time is invested for each contract and what the deliverables are for that.
Yeah, that's been a big thing too, is like kind of protecting myself and my team and my agency, because I've been in situations where like we gave them the estimate. Maybe it wasn't as clearly an estimate. It was more like a price, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we weren't super clear on like the boundaries, even though it was listed, like what's included in the deliverables, like how many rounds of revisions, etc. It there somewhere along the way got lost in translation. It wasn't mentioned that we had, overstepped, and not overstepped, but we had gone above and beyond. And then now it's like we're doing all of these extra hours, and because we like made an exception at one point, then it's like, oh, we made another exception, and then next thing you know, it's this snowball effect, and now you're operating and working from a place of lack because you feel like you're not being supported, or at least me, because honestly my team doesn't know the difference. They're getting paid one way or another. It's more like from my perspective, right? And I'm like all of these little things that we were doing just to be like, oh, it's not a big deal, like sure, we'll do it. Now I'm like, you know what, even if it's small, let's at least be clear and say this is not included, but we will happily make this one time, change for you, even though it's out of scope. And then this way, next time when something is out of scope and we say no, they're not like, well, how come you can't just like make this one time? Be like, well, we already did. So my issue was like my team and I weren't communicating that we were making these exceptions. Like I would tell my team like, yeah, it's no problem, like just do it. But then I wasn't also telling them to let the client know that this was an exception. Now, let me tell you, it's very fucking clear. And in our contracts too, it's very fucking clear. Like, almost too clear to the point where people are like, geez, like,
Well, I think there's also a way, and I mean, I've been caught in those same situations, and I think there's really a way to approach it with the client. And then the client turns around and like, oh my God, I didn't realize, and I'm so sorry. Right. Like, I think it's happened before that I've just like, it's especially with the meetings for me, it's a lot of meetings that could be, you see that meme all the time that it's a lot of meetings that could just be an email. And I'm really big on email and just kind of like cutting to the chase. And I'll say something about that after too, but about like emails and cutting to the chase. But like, it's a lot of like the meetings I find. And then, it's simply like going to the client and saying, hey, like these are the hours that are allocated for this. And like, should you need more time, like I'm happy to deliver on that, but there's going to be an extra charge of this for extra meetings and extra time. It's just, it's a sake of being like, everyone's professional. And for the most part, like all these people like run businesses too, like they understand that time is money. Like they understand that like they don't want to have their time wasted either. So it's just about being, I feel like it's just about being transparent in that conversation about like what, that this is like, we need to respect each other's time and boundaries. But the other thing I was going to say is like, I am a very straight to the point kind of person. Like I will hop onto a Zoom and like jump right in. And I've had to learn, and I work a lot on this with my business coach. Some people, they like to ask about your weekend and they like to chat about things. And so I've really, really had to like train myself to just be a little bit more empathetic to like what other people also like. Some people just, they like that one-on-one time with you for half an hour so that they can chat about their concerns and they can really like have that. And it's not because I'm not like that my clients won't appreciate that. You know what I mean? So those are like having to deal with like different personalities and also like morphing and shaping your way of doing things so that it accommodates the client and like what the client likes, which has been like a huge learning curve because I go straight in. Let's jump right in.
I feel like I have like a decent balance, but I've had the opposite end of the spectrum where like clients will like, they'll ask about like, oh, how was your family? And like, oh, and then, but they're giving me like full updates on like, well, my daughter just got married and this one just had the first grandchild. I'm like, oh my God, congratulations. Like what, I'm not gonna like tell you that, my sister is pregnant, but
no. But see, that's such a funny thing because I mean, I think especially in my early on clients, like the clients I've worked with for 4 to 5 years, I've created such, especially the ones I see in person, I've created such
Yeah.
a personal relationship with them, right?
That's
We
different.
live in the same community and we're
Yeah.
basically friends, and you have to tread lightly with that too.
Yeah.
But it's just funny to me, like you're right. It's just, and I empathize. Like I can see why people are like that and why they like to chat about these things. It's just so not my, but even it's funny because even the business coach said, like if you're going to grow a team and you're going to have people and you're going to have an office, you got to ask them like, how was your weekend? Like, how are things? You can't just like come in and be like, okay, emails.
Yeah.
Let's jump right in. Now you have to have a little bit more, like there's a little bit of a personality check. Like you got to be a little bit more personable. So anyways, I'm working on that. It's not my
Yeah.
strength.
I think
but
when it's your team though too, it's a little bit different. Like
for sure.
I'm
Yeah.
way more like that with my team, and like I feel like I'm like friends with my team at this point too. With my
Yeah.
clients, I set a little bit more of a boundary, I would say, but I'm probably similar to you. Like I like to kind of like get to the point, but also like I'm at the point where like I'm not really in the meetings anymore anyway, so I'm
Yeah,
like
it's true.
off the hook.
So nice. Oh, the dream. Yeah, no, I'm trying. I'm moving in that direction for sure. For sure. For sure.
Yeah, it'll feel good when you get there.
Yeah, can't wait.
So I want to ask, are you like at like kind of like a shifting point right now, would you say, or do you feel like it's happened, or do you feel like you haven't really hit that yet?
Definitely a shifting point, mostly in, the growth was so fast and so great, like all good things. But I just feel like I told you at the beginning, I feel like there's like a lot of processes kind of lacking. Like there's a lot of things that should be in place that are not in place. So to me, that's the shift is I think we're turning a corner where now I'm going to have more time to work on those things and make sure we're kind of like streamlining and offering a better client experience all the time. So I mean, I definitely think I've only nicked the potential and also only like nicked the vision that I have for my business. Like I'm a very, very big picture thinker and have all kinds of projects that I want to establish. And I know I will probably establish them all in good time. But right now it's always just been like keeping my head above water and making sure that everything gets done. And now that I'm turning that corner and I'm having somebody starting on full time, then I'll be able to really reassess like, okay, how many people do I want to have internally? How many people do I want to work with externally?
Yeah.
And then who do I want to work with, right? I want to get to a place where who do I want to work with? Who is a client that's like really speaks the essence of Kale marketing, and like who do I feel really inspired working for, right? Because I don't think I want to get away from, catching everything as it comes. And I want to make sure that everyone that I work with is a really, really good fit. And I think when you're in the growth phase and you're trying to keep your head above water, everyone seems like a good fit and they're not.
Yeah.
So I want to get more to a point where like, not that we're being more selective, but I just want to really create a community of clients that I feel, and also I really see it also as a whole networking and community tool, because a lot of my clients, they become intertwined, right? I have so many clients from different industries that end up collaborating together, right? Which I think is really, really cool. And I can always have this referral point, like, oh, I have this client, let me introduce you, right? So we're kind of always networking. And I think that's given a really nice climate to the business. But I really feel, and I think I'm just always going to feel like this, like that I've only nicked the potential of what I can do, what I can accomplish. And like, I don't know about you, but I have notebooks and notebooks and notebooks and notebooks of like scribbles and like ideas and like brain dumps and brainstorms and like all kinds of different things. And my ideas evolve every single day. And I'm the kind of person that really gets overwhelmed by my own ideas. I don't know if you know what I mean by that, but it's just like I get so many ideas and it's like exhausting.
It kind of jumps back to the thing of like you can connect it to the whole like learning by learning versus learning by doing. So it's like you have these ideas and you're writing them on paper, but you're not actually moving forward and like executing them, So it's like pick one, the one that's inspiring you, speaking to you most, and like move forward, get it done, do it. Or it sounds like you're also super overwhelmed because you have so many clients and it's literally like you and someone else. So what if it's about, like taking that jump and alleviating your responsibilities, even if you don't necessarily need someone, you want someone, because by having that person, it'll give you the room to grow, right? And to do those other things that you want to do. And by having that additional person to support you, you can say yes to more clients. Like how many clients do you have on a monthly basis?
Oh my God, 25 to 30.
That's insane. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, some of them are small, like some of them are smaller mandates, some of them are bigger mandates.
Still.
Like it's really, really different, but I manage a lot of things at the same time, which is why I work until 11:30. But no, you're right. It's also like, it's a huge, I think what you did really right in your business model is that you have like all kinds of freelancers in your community, right? Like that's kind of what, because I take having an employee is a huge responsibility. Like I don't take that responsibility lightly, and it's like something that's really important to me. So I don't want to get myself into a place where I have all these really great employees, but I can't nurture them and take care of them the way that I want to take care of them. So I see it as like one step at a time, and then I rely on like a lot of the different suppliers. But like, you know, there's a lot of conversations about like there's probably a lot of suppliers that I could utilize to help take some of that off my plate. It's just a question of there's just so many things to get done. Like the list is so long all
Oh
the
my God. But
time.
like,
It's
but get
wild.
someone to help you. Get someone to help you make that list.
Yeah,
I'm
for
not even
sure.
joking. Like, especially with social, it's a process that like there are tons of people that can do the job. Find someone that can do it a great job,
Hmm.
you know, support them in whatever way that they need in the beginning. But if even if it's you, just like a matter of like approving the calendar in the end to make sure that it's like still up to your standard or whatever, because your clients are used to your way of working, then like imagine how much time you're saving. 25 to 30 clients a month. Are you
It's
nuts?
wild.
How do
Yeah.
you have time to grow your business?
Yeah, it's wild. So that's the thing though, is like we're really getting to that point. And then my goal is to have like I would like to have another employee on by the end of the year. Like that would be,
Yeah.
or if I can have like a freelancer or
Yeah.
subcontractor or whatnot
Just
that
to
can take on
start.
some of it just to
Yeah.
start.
Yeah.
Just but yeah, no, I oversee everything. I overlook all the calendars and whatnot, but it's just like goes back to what I was saying before about being a micromanager and
Yeah.
not having a
Yeah.
great work-life balance. So but it's all learning. And like a funny thing too is I tell people this all the time. Like, I am the only person in my family who has a business. Like, I don't have
Hmm.
any entrepreneurs. Like, my parents came from a corporate background, and like, I don't have, like, I've never seen this in action really like that close up. Like, obviously, I know other people who have businesses and whatnot, but it's a very lonely sort of situation that I put myself in because like I don't have anything to compare it to, right? Like I
Hmm.
never worked for another agency and I also don't have, so it's like all these things that they, and I've come a long way, like especially in the last, I'd say 2 years, maybe three, like ever since COVID happened, like I've come a long way from what I was doing before. Like I graduated university and like really, really, really like improved on a lot of different things and like sorted some things out. But then again, it's like it's also like in full transparency, like cash flow is a big thing too. So you want to make sure you're
Hmm.
always like staying on top of that. And yeah, it'll sort itself out. I'm optimistic. Like I've come such a long way. There's no way it's not gonna all sort itself out like within the next couple of months, hopefully. So
Hmm. What
yeah.
was that like with the fact that you're like the first entrepreneur in the family? Did you have a lot of pushback from like your parents? Were they super
No.
supportive?
No, my parents were super, super supportive. I think my parents really like trust that I make good decisions, which I do. Like I think my parents were always very, and I mean, I come again, I'm very, very, very fortunate. Like my parents were always very supportive and my parents would always, you know, help me like be there to pick me up if I fell down or whatnot. Like they would always be supportive of that. I think at first it was a little bit, I think the weird thing for them was maybe because I'm so out there and like I put myself out there and like I post a lot of pictures of myself and whatnot. Like they thought that was weird. Like that was like a little bit like of an unusual, like, okay, like, you know, like my mom like doesn't like to have her picture taken and like doesn't like to
Right.
be in pictures and whatever. So she thought that was a little weird. But I think they've kind of seen now like what kind of feedback I get and like especially in the community, the small community where I'm from, like I've created like a really great like I'm like I don't want to say like I'm not no celebrity or anything, but I'm like very well known
Yeah.
in the community that I'm from and like for what I do. And I've hosted like great charity events. I've hosted like a really epic holiday market during the holidays. So like I'm doing all these things. And I think once my family like saw all these things that I'm capable of and kind of like the feedback that I'm getting, like there was no issue. Not that there was ever an issue. I mean, I think for my parents, it's obviously concerning because you don't have the security of working a 9 to 5, right? It's not like working for like an accounting firm or whatever. It's the stability. I think maybe there were a little, but
Yeah.
I've never had any, knock on wood again, like I've never had any issues in that department. So I've always been able to like sustain myself and like take care of myself. So I don't think that they
Yeah.
have any issues with that.
Yeah, I would say the same, honestly. Like I think, well, my sister started her own business too, and then like my dad was in real estate, so there's, you know, all these like different
Yeah.
entrepreneurial elements. So for them maybe it was like less of a surprise, let's say. But I think I was working at like the Aldo group at one point and I was like, fuck this. I want to work for myself. No, no, no. And they're like, you
Yeah.
just left like an amazing job. Why would you do that? And I'm like, as much as like I loved the brand and the people, I hated having to be in there, the 9 to 5, the corporate culture, blah, 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 you know, the same whole thing. And I think the concern was more like, why are you leaving something so stable when you were already
Mm-hmm.
doing so well for yourself to then like try and make it on your own? And then like, what if it doesn't work? So I think they would just want to make sure I would be okay until
For
like I
sure.
proved them wrong. And then now they're like, okay, yeah, you're
I mean,
fine.
I think any good parent just wants the best for you. And I think
Yeah.
it always comes from a good place. But to be honest with you, like I did things and I didn't even run it by them first. Like I decided I was
Oh,
going to
yeah.
leave my part-time job and I didn't say anything. And I was like, oh yeah, by the way, last month I pursued this full time and I'm doing it full time. So I'm the kind of person that doesn't really ask permission for anything. Like I just
Yeah.
do what I want when I want to do it. I was always kind of like that. But I mean, I think they see it from, and the way I see it too is like, this would never happen, but if it, in the case where it did and I'd have to go back to a corporate job, like I don't think I'd have any issues finding myself like a 9 to 5 job, right? There's always a
Right.
backup. It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
like it
Yeah.
would be like, it's not like the sky would
Exactly.
fall and like there's a backup. I could always go back to, you know, the software company I worked for. I'm sure they would hire me back. Like there's all these different opportunities I'm sure would have, should I decide to not stay on this path. So I think once they saw that, and it's just come, obviously, like I think they're always concerned, like they'll probably always be concerned, but I think that's, I was like you did, I proved them wrong and like proved to
Yeah.
them that I was capable of doing this on my own, and I did.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think it was ever a permission thing either. I kind
No.
of was like always just like walk to the beat of my own drum. Is that what they say?
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Well, thank you so much for being on. I want to end the podcast with a segment I like to call Mindful Minute,
Okay.
where you leave our listeners with a piece of advice or something that like you would want to share with them. So the floor is yours.
Okay, I have a few. I actually wrote these ones down. So somebody actually, the software company that I worked for, the guy who owned the software company pulled me aside one day and he said, what are you doing? Like what's happening? He knew I had a side hustle. He knew I was doing marketing on the side. And he was like, what's your plan? Like, what are you doing? Are you going to stay here? Are you going to pursue your side hustle? And I said, I don't really know. And he said to me, he said, Katrina, he said, if you decide to stay on as an employee, your side hustle is going to be put aside. He's like, he says, you're in first gear all the time. You're a great employee. You're not going to compromise your job for your side hustle, and your side hustle will fall through the cracks. He said, I would jump in full on, full steam ahead, and you'll always have a place to come back to if anything happens. So I think that was really good advice because that's what I did. Honestly, like that, I jumped in full speed, but he was right in saying that, like, I think if you have a side hustle that you really want to pursue as a career, you need to make sure that you're giving it the attention that it deserves. Otherwise it's not going to like come, it's not going to manifest itself the way that you want to. Another one would be to ask questions. I think if you're surrounded by great people or people who have corporate jobs, people who have high positions, low positions, I like to ask everybody questions. I don't care what your story is, what
Hence
you do.
the podcast.
I always, hence the podcast. Yeah. So I love to ask people questions and like hear about how they got there, how they learned,
Yeah.
you know, what they do, what that looks like, what's the organization like how, you know, at the fire station, like what's the management like, you know what I mean? Like I like to know like how things, so
Operate,
I think that's really, like, I think you get so much about that and then you can apply it to your own business. So like, don't be afraid to ask questions, and people love to talk about what they do and talk about themselves. So like, don't hesitate to ask questions. A third one would be, don't worry about what other people think. That was a really hard one at first, like, especially when you put yourself out there and like the way that I do. And like, I post so many things on social media and whatnot, and somebody will always have something to say about what you're doing. And that should never, ever stop you. And I think that's just a projection of like their own insecurity. So that's like one big one. I think probably you get that one a lot, but just like to not worry about what other people are saying or what other people think about what you do. And then the last one, I think this is my favorite one: travel alone. I think that everybody should do a solo travel at least one time, and you'll leave your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your husband, your whatever at home. They'll be fine.
They will be.
And even if it's just a one-nighter downtown or a 3-day trip or 1 week or 1 month or whatever, I think everyone should put themselves out of their comfort zone and travel by themselves at least once in their life. I think that's like a game changing. If you can do that by yourself and you can accomplish it and you can spend that time by yourself and you can go eat at a restaurant by yourself, you're golden. You can do anything. You can accomplish anything.
That's like so on brand for Nomad Creative too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you want to have all this flexibility, but the reason I bring this one up is because like I've done that. I've done solo
Yeah.
travel, and like every time I tell somebody that, they're always like, "Oh my God, I could never do that." What do you mean you could
Mhm.
never do that?
I
Don't
love
ever
it.
say I could never do something. You can do anything.
Yes, preach girl. I
Yeah.
agree. I
Yeah.
freaking love traveling alone. And so my husband's actually in the military, so he
Yes.
goes away on deployment pretty frequently. And almost every deployment, I book a trip alone.
It's the
I'm
greatest
like,
thing. Like,
I have no guilt because he's not like sitting at home, like he's doing his thing too. So it's like, well, might as well go on my own trip as well. So, and I love it,
absolutely.
I love it. And like the whole eating alone, this and that. I don't know. There's something like really beautiful about number one, like just like reconnecting with yourself,
Yep.
and like really understanding like what makes you happy, what like just even in Europe, like example, like walking down the streets and then choosing to turn on a random alleyway because like that's where you want to go and not have to look at someone and be like, what do you think about going this way? Like just do it. You just do everything that you want. You go where you want,
Yeah.
whatever you feel. I love it.
Eat what you want, sleep
Yeah.
in when you want. So I
Yeah.
had the opportunity to do like 2 work travels in the last couple of months. And you go to the restaurant, there's not much to it. People will talk to you. If you sit at the bar, the people will talk to you. If you're uncomfortable, bring your AirPods or read
Yeah.
a book or bring a journal and like journal. It's really like, I think once you do it one time, it's fine. And I think it's really, really important to be comfortable in your own company. And I think if you're comfortable in your own company, you can accomplish anything.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. All right. Tell everybody where they can find you, Katrina.
So they can find me on Instagram. I post a lot of stuff there. So on Instagram at Katrina Legault, Katrina with a K. My website is katrinalegault.com. And I also have a podcast myself. So the Bring Your Own Wine podcast. So on Instagram, it's _BYOW_podcast. And there we have just casual conversations about careers and entrepreneurship over wine. So yeah, I think that's it.
Fun stuff. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Until next time. Bye.
Thanks for having me.